constant. For me, it's all within, right? It's me. The external's not a problem, right? It's the battle within. It's like, what voice am I listening to? Is it my ego? Is this God? Is this the influence of others? And you and I talk a lot about how do you know when God's talking to you? So
you go back to Adam and Eve. When God was looking for them, and Adam, where art thou?
Yeah.
I hid because I was naked. Who told you were naked?
Who told you that?
So,
that's good.
So who told you were stupid?
Right.
Who told you you were less than?
Yeah.
What voices are we listening to?
Yeah. That's what voices, because it is a constant. For me, it's all within, right? It's me. The external's not a problem, right? It's the battle within. It's like, what voice am I listening to? Is it my ego? Is this God? Is this the influence of others? And you and I talk a lot about how do you know when God's talking to you? So now I'm being very intentional of just paying attention to what's going on, because to your point earlier when we were talking, I remember a time clearly when I fasted, because I was praying for a transition in my life, and I fasted, and the transition came. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, so that's how you get results when it comes to my relationship with God. And I remember I was praying for another transition a couple years later, and I fasted, did the very same thing, but it didn't happen. The transition came from a different view for a different person or a different thing. So I'm now learning that it's not going to all come the same way. So what are some practices, or how do you stay conscious and aware of where God, because God can speak to you through another person. It could come, I guess, be a dream, listening to a song, to impress.
It's funny you said that too, because when I first started going to church and became a Christian, that's where the majority of my help and inspiration would be a song. I could hear a song, whether it was "He'll Come to My Rescue," when I call on the Lord, He'll come to my rescue. That was one of the songs I sang at, in the choir, and it was just like, if I call Him, He'll come to my rescue. So it was just a song. My cousin sang a song, "One Prayer Away," and I think it was about 1985. Without dating myself, I was probably in the 10th grade, but that song just really carried me through the remainder of my high school. When it was like, when pain and sorrow seems to surround me and troubles of this world weigh me down, I call on Jesus Christ, my Savior, the only true friend I've ever found. So when I can't go on, all my hope is gone, He promised in His word that He'd be there, that He'd be a friend down to the end. Lord knows how much I can bear. I must run and tell Jesus, for He is just one prayer away. And I was just like, and just hearing that, and being in high school, the last couple of years, whether it was needing something for school or the grades or just different stuff, but that song was kind of an anchor for me. And so, as I said, but then there was a time as I matured, songs wouldn't stick with me like they used to. So then it became maybe a sermon. Sermons would God would do certain things, whether.
Now, did you get concerned in that point? So your main communication with God had been through song for so long. And then one day, as you were maturing, that was no longer the consistent thing. Was there any concern about?
Well, I think when you mentioned formulas earlier, we tried to make things happen.
Right.
Well, I like this song. I'm feeling that. Oh, this is what He's going to do. And I think the thing about relationship with Him, and as far as you mature, when you say, I heard a word, which is a revelation, which is the revealed word, that's when you know you've got so back then, I know now that I heard the word through the song, and the word was what latched on.
Right.
It wasn't the song, it was the word via the song.
Got you, right.
And so thinking that, I could listen to radio 24/7, but nothing's happening. No, He wanted a deeper relationship, so I had to study the Bible, and it takes on another level. And so I remember just having a rough time not my current job. Well, that's a story.
Yeah.
Corporate America, and I was almost, would sometimes was just being borderline in tears at this job, and just how God would, wake me up in 2 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes I would hear just one word. And I recall one time I had one specific lady. I hated this lady. I could not stand her. And I woke up one morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's like we were sitting here talking, and the only thing I hear is disdain.
Okay.
And so I'm like, all right. So I take my phone and I'm Googling, hey, let me look at this definition. Oh, so God was letting me know this is what I felt for this lady.
That's just an audible voice? Is this a feeling? When you heard disdain?
It wasn't audible, but you hear it in conscience-wise, but I hear
got you.
It's disdain. It's not.
It caught your awareness. It caught your consciousness.
And
okay,
so
got you.
I know that was him.
Right.
So I'm looking up, and of course, based on the definition, he was instructing me, okay, you don't act like this. You can't feel like this towards somebody. Even if she was not the best person in how she handled it, you can't have. So that changed that for me.
Yeah.
Because if you have disdain and stuff like that for people, it disrupts you. And that's another thing too. I learned bitterness cancels your creativity.
For sure.
Yeah. When you find yourself bitter, nothing's happening, and that's what. So just taking the lessons that you've learned and then reflecting over it. My pastor did a series a couple of years ago, and it was called "Call to Reflect."
Okay.
One of the best. It was just you had to reflect on why you are where you are, how how did I get here. But just the way he broke it down, there are certain things you look back, family issues. Okay, if I stop and reflect, how did that get that way? And so just having to go back and face certain things, so I know without a doubt, even going back to the corporate job and the burden that was. Thankfully, we were able to listen to music, and you could play sermons and stuff via your earphones.
Yeah.
That was the biggest help, because I heard so many. I think your pastor from Elevation, the expectation gap, the source of my frustration.
Yes.
That was in the chatterbox.
Yes.
And being able to listen to those over and over and over.
Got you, to get it into your soul. Okay.
And so that was the thing that I had at work that time that began to, but my mindset had to change, because my attitude, I still would get frustrated, if things were going wrong, just like, because you wanted to change when you wanted to change, and you wanted to change how you think it's going to change.
On our time.
Right,
yeah.
And then accepting the fact, that it's not going to, what do I do?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to make the best of it. But I think, whoever said your attitude will determine your aptitude, I think they were so spot on. I used to think that was just a cliche.
It's a cliche, yeah.
I think it's so spot on.
Yeah. So it sounds like God, and this is great, God meets us where we are. So how in the space where you were, how God connected with you early on was the music, because that was where you were at the time. But as you matured, he stretched. Okay, now song has been your resource for so long. I need for you to grow now. I need for you to utilize another resource. And he keeps building and building and building. So what it sounds like, and this is what I'm now starting to figure out, is that faith building lies within the doing. The relationship building of God lies within the doing. We so often get the, I'm waiting on God, or, it's like when we think about waiting, we think about it in the sense of, I'm just going to sit here.
Yeah.
But that's not how you progress. That's not how you build. It's within the doing. where faith is built. It's within the experiences where God can show himself. And as you and I talked about on that specific point, it was an eye-opener for me, because if you're not growing in your relationship with God, if you're not progressing within your life, maybe it's because that you're not doing. Maybe you're doing a lot of thinking, but you're not doing, and the doing creates the experiences, and it's within the experiences where God can show up.
And I think too, also, when you say, you know, you got the people that think, I read 5 chapters a day.
That's where I was.
I'm spending time with him, but I'm not retaining anything.
Right. So I'm just reading, right? I'm just going through the motions.
Yeah. I can take one scripture and meditate on that, and that has a better impact than me reading the 5, because I'm just reading, and I feel like I've got a pat on the back because I read 5 chapters.
Right.
And so many people, and I think that goes back to formula. I feel good because I read 5 chapters.
Right. And so because I read those 5, my expectation is this. And when that expectation doesn't show itself,
we fall short. Yeah, and it's just, and we're disappointed. And I think that's another thing too. God's thoughts are way higher than ours.
Right.
So what I think is good for me may not be good, or how I think he's going to do it, he may not do it. So that's another thing. I can't figure him out, and he's not going to let you figure him out, you know, because he's God, you know, and he does what he wants in his own time. Now, faith plays a part in what we get from him, but also, you know, he knows our motive. Are we asking for it for the wrong reasons? Is it just my ego? Or is it the fact that, you know, maybe I can't handle it right now? If your child asks you for, hey, Dad, I want a car, you know, you can't handle a car.
Right.
You know, you might be able to sit and drive a little way down the street, but mentally you can't handle a car.
Right.
So some of the stuff that we're asking him for, he knows our motives. I'm not giving that. That's going to make you even more egotistic, you know, egotistical, or take you away from your family more, or make you lose lack of focus. So he won't, you know, because we think him giving us stuff is a sign that he is good. That goes back to also with, I think, having a healthy relationship with your dad, your earthly dad.
Yeah.
I think so many of us don't, that if you didn't have one, then we don't really know how to, God is our Father. So we really don't know how to handle him in that way, because some of us didn't have a good view of a father.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, my dad, he's still around. And one thing, I met a guy back in maybe 2000 in Connecticut. And we were having a conversation, and he didn't know who his dad was, and I think his mother was on drugs and stuff like that, so his aunt raised him. So we were talking, and he asked me about my parents, and he said, oh, are your parents still together? I said, oh yeah. He said, oh wow, that is really cool. And I'm thinking like, oh, what's the big deal? But then later on, the light came on, that was a big deal.
Right.
You know, so he may not have done everything like I wanted to, but the fact that he remained, I had something that this person didn't have.
And then you will take that for granted, and you can start forming a false narrative of what your life really is, and things of that nature.
Yeah. And it's amazing. So, and then too, even therapeutic, you know, of how I thought about my dad. You know, I took an acting class back in 2007, I think it was, the Tasha Smith acting workshop.
Okay.
It was phenomenal, but you know, we did a dumping exercise.
Okay.
And so that was, when you say dumping exercise, if you think about somebody that's constipated, you know, you take a dump.
Right.
You know, in the acting world, you want to be comfortable, you know, when you're doing your lines and on stage or before cameras and stuff like that. So we got on stage, and you know, she got this young lady that had taken the class in New York, and she came to Atlanta and took it again. So she got her to show us how to do the dumping exercise. So the young lady gets on the stage, and she's telling us, you know, she goes into whoever she's talking to, you know, you did this to me, and I should have left you then, and I took you back. And by the time she gets to the end of it, she's just hysterically crying. You know, I should have effing left you, blah blah blah. And I'm like, we're like, what is going on?
Right.
You know, she had to be consoled by the teacher. You know,
right.
And it was like, what in the world just happened? So we get on stage. You know, there was so many of us. She was like, okay, I'm gonna put y'all on stage at one time. I'm like, oh, this ain't gonna work. And the first thing that comes out of my mouth, I said, Dad, I when I was younger, I don't think you liked me. I didn't think you liked me. I bawled.
Yeah.
That was like one sentence.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what in the world? But it was so therapeutic. It changed my perception of him. You know, and because, and also with how my dad grew up, and you know, knowing his parents. Sometimes we expect something from people that they don't have. I can't give you what I don't have.
Yes, that's good. Say that again. Say that again.
I can't give you what I don't have.
Yes, right.
So you're looking at, you know, for them to do this, but he was never shown this. So I don't have a blueprint or a model to go by of how I should handle you.
Yes.
You know? And so if we're not careful, that becomes a perpetual cycle.
Yes.
You see it all the time, especially in some of our African American families and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that, you know, not making excuses, but I think slavery plays a lot of that, you know, the families being separated.
Sure, yeah.
So not seeing, you know, being raised without the family unit or the dad around. So I think that to me is one of the where that kind of started at back then. So, you know, historically I think it still plays, you know, because things were passed down.
Right.
Because, you know, it was never dealt with, because, you know, as psychologically what the slaves had to endure. Can you imagine trying to have a peace of mind in home, having endured what you know, without any therapy or anything like that? So.
Yeah. I mean, that's so good. So we're going to end it on this question right here, Robert. And what would be your advice? What would you say to that person that has tried for so long to do life on their own, and they're exhausted, they're frustrated, they're on the verge of giving up, and they want to have a relationship with God and really grow that? What would you say? The beginning, the most practical, the most, like, what would you tell that person?
I would say read your Bible and trust God to show himself to you, and believe first and foremost, but that would be the thing, just pursuing him to show himself, and he'll do that, you know, because outside of him we can't do anything on our own, and that's where the frustration comes, because we do it in our own energy, and we're spinning our wheels because we have a little bit of this, but then it just all of a sudden it hits a standstill, and I'm frustrated because I go back to the thing that I came out of, which is worse than and that's what,
because there's a comfort there. There's a comfort within our dysfunction. How we can become so comfortable with that whenever we get to a point of where we're uncomfortable, we want to go back to where we're comfortable, even if it's dysfunctional. Instead of being willing enough,
because it's familiar.
Because it's familiar. Instead of being willing enough to be uncomfortable for a period of time in this next phase, this next stretch, this next resource that's being presented to you, instead of being uncomfortable for a period of time until we will retreat.
I think isn't that as those guys that do bodybuilding or fitness? When you first start out, you know, you're not seeing any results, and you go home and you're sore and nothing's happening. You know, that's a light example, but that's a good example, because they continue to push through. So 6 months down the road, they're seeing the results. And then a year later, oh my God, I'm just completely transformed. And it becomes a lifestyle.
Then it transitions to a lifestyle. So what you're saying is, to someone that really wants to grow a relationship with God, start by reading your Bible. It's the entry point. As you're reading it, because even with my experience, as I read the Bible, I really didn't, nothing changed.
And Proverbs is an extremely easy read, but it just gives such a wisdom in almost like our everyday talking. And also, you know, the Bibles now, there's so many different Bibles.
Right.
The Message Bible is just like our everyday, you know, so it's not as difficult to follow.
The language of it all. Right.
Like it used to be. So
right.
there really is no excuse, you know,
right.
Now. And so as it was back then, we were more limited back then. But yeah, definitely.
So the practice of reading the Bible, even if it's not making sense, even if it's not connecting, even if nothing is changing right now in that moment, the consistency, the repetition, the intention of building a relationship with God, there will become a point where you will be able to see. So kind of like you're talking about the reflection, where if you take the time to go and reflect, you can look back and see where God did move in your life, where while you were in it, you did not see it because you were in it. But when you get away from it, you can see it. And I think with the reflection piece, being able to recognize God within that situation, it brings a certain level of confidence as you're navigating through life, knowing that even when you don't have the awareness or don't feel God, because like you're lifting the weights, you're doing the work, but you're not seeing the result. Right. It is still within the doing. There's a confidence knowing that although you may not feel Him, or you may not feel like He's not talking to you, or you may not feel whatever, that He's still there and He's still shaping and molding you. And so within that reflection, you're able to gain the confidence to continue to move forward.
Yeah, and I think lastly, I'll say now, you know, most people like, you know, I want to know God's will for my life. And I heard this on the radio a couple of days ago, and it was kind of like, oh wow, that makes sense. You know, if I want to know God's will, I need to read the Bible, because that is His word, and that's, you know. So if your dad left you something in His will, and in order for you to get it, I need to find out what's in it.
Right.
So that's what He's done for us via His Bible, the Word. So if I want to know His will, then I need to know the Word.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. Man, I hope you all have enjoyed this. I know that I've gotten a lot from this conversation. I hope you have as well. So once again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your attention. Robert, thank you so much, man.
Absolutely.
Thank you to... hold on. Let me get the shot. We in the barbershop, y'all. We in the barbershop. Hold on. I want to give a special thank you to Azil Barbershop here in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Andre.
If you are in the Charlotte area, ask for Andre. He will take care of you.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for your time. And until we meet again, go be great.